So here's the first question. Mom and Dad, why are we at this reunion? Why is this important for you guys that the family is together to celebrate your 60th wedding anniversary?
Okay, we'll give two answers on that. I'll give one and your mom will give another one, maybe. We're here to celebrate. And in celebration, we're bringing family together from all over the continent, getting together, having a good time, fun, celebrating family, and renewing faith. I think that's why we're here.
I think part of it too is that we want to see our children learn to know each other, their cousins. A lot of times some of you didn't know who some of the other cousins were until we got together, because they're added to the family. You start with 5 kids, but you end up with 5 kids and their spouses, and then you start getting their children, and so we have grandkids. Then they start having kids, so we have one great-grandson now. So it's trying to get everybody to learn to know each other better.
Why is that important to you?
It's important to me because I like to see people love each other and do things for each other. If somebody's sick in the family, we'd like to let people know if they're really sick badly, so that you could react with each other and send a card or call or something, just so people know each other, love each other, and take care of each other to a certain degree.
And we're building memories.
Yep.
In at least 2 generations here.
So you said I could ask this question last night, so I will right out of the chute. Jamaica and affording this luxury, how do you justify that?
Good question. The answer for that is not easy in the sense of a family that has, through the years, been very frugal. We've attempted to manage our resources carefully, and bringing us all together, 25th anniversary, 40th, 50th, now the 60th, spends money. The justification, in my mind, the real justification is that we are planting the seeds of togetherness that are going to outlast all of us who are here today. I'm counting on the stories of Jamaica being told for several generations down the road, and that, because we're together as a family, in my mind, justifies this. Sure, we could be spending the money on other things, and there are certainly worthy causes, but we want to take care of family in a proper way, and we're family.
Well, and part of it too, we've never had a great big salary. We never earned $100,000 a year, anything like that. But we've been very frugal with what we have, always putting some away every month through the teaching process that he goes through. They just take it out automatically. But then they invest in TIA CRIF. That's money for us that we don't have to put in ourselves, because our money is making money. So we're trying to be very frugal with the money we have.
So one of the purposes of this video is to go back and capture some of your memories of growing up, because not just your 60th anniversary, but you're both 80 years old. The roots and the wings that you're providing to children, I wanted to go back and ask some questions way back. So we're going to start, Mom, with you. What is your earliest memory?
My very earliest memory is when I was about 2 years old, living in Henderson, Nebraska, where I was born. In the house where I was born, I had a kitten, or a cat of some sort, and that cat died. And I remember my dad digging a hole underneath a tree in our backyard, and my mom brought out a shoebox or something about that size. We put the cat in the shoebox, put the shoebox down into the ground, and I stood up there singing, "Jesus Loves Me," when I was a little over 2. That was my first memory.
Dad, what about yours? You wrote about nibbling.
Well, my very earliest memories are probably very foggy, and I can't pinpoint a date. very early memories would be hearing from my parents about the death of my oldest brother. David, the oldest brother, died 8 months after I was born, died of appendicitis. The first memory that I can really peg by date happened in a very interesting manner. My oldest sister, Edna, was being courted by Bert Cleaver. And Bert would come over to visit with the family and visit, of course, with my sister. One Saturday night, and I can peg it a Saturday night because that's the night we took baths, okay? To take baths, we put up a curtain over the kitchen doorway, and then the water was heated on an old kerosene stove, poured into a galvanized tub, and we would get baths. I usually got the first bath. I would make it the least dirty. I was the youngest in the family. But the water then would be changed probably once or twice, but otherwise everybody would use the same water to bathe in. That's all we had. And Bert that night, that Saturday night, was teaching me how to make a propeller out of a sheet of paper, one of these little wind propellers, and if you blow on it or if you run, it'll go round and round. And I thought that was very neat. I liked Bert. He gave me a penny every time he came over for my piggy bank. In order to get the maximum speed out of my little windmill, I started at the far end of the living room and I ran toward the kitchen. But I couldn't stop. And my mom was taking a bath. And my head poked into the curtain, and there was my mom without clothes on. The first thing I did was to lie. I said, I didn't see anything. And that's a memory that sticks with me because I only saw the backside of my mother, but that is a memory that I still have plugged back my mother's derriere.
Different than a little cat dying.
Oh yeah. But
Yeah.
now you did write down about nibbling. I didn't quite understand what nibbling.
Yeah. I was a very sickly child, okay? And that may be a part of why I'm relatively healthy today. I got every infection that was going around. In order to comfort me, my sisters and my mom would allow me to take the soft skin of the neck and kibble. That was the equivalent for me of sucking my thumb, I think. It gave me satisfaction. As a result of this, I developed a very heavy skin on my neck, and when my sisters would let me kibble on them, and I still do some of that today because it's comforting to feel the soft skin between my fingers and go like this. Yeah.
Huh. So besides your mom's derriere and your situation with your kitten, why don't you start by describing your mom and dad? What are your memories of your mom and dad, good and bad?
Well, I remember very early that they had to move from Nebraska to Oregon, and I was 3 years old. And I remember a little bit about my mom taking care of me on the trip, in that she was always watching me and being careful for me. And I got a little car sick one day, sitting in the back seat with her, and I ended up throwing up. And she wasn't mad at me or anything. She cleaned it up, and we kept right on going. So I thought that she was a very loving person, and not, saying, "Hey, why did you do that?" I had no help. I couldn't help it. Also, that time was a tough time, and my mom. Well, we ended up renting a house that my mom's relatives had, kind of up on a hill, and it was a red and green house out in kind of the woods. And my mom there were chickens out there. And my mom and I would go out there and look for chicken eggs. Every day we'd go out and look for chicken eggs in the yard someplace, because there wasn't a chicken house anyplace. It was just the yard. So we'd do that, and also we'd pick, like, strawberry times would come, and we'd go get all the wild strawberries. It was a very loving time that my mom really watched over me, and she was having a rough time. They ended up in Oregon with only $4 in their pockets. That was it for a family that was moving there. And Mom, they did a lot of baking of homemade rolls and bread to sell. So she was busy a lot with that. But she also always took time to go out and look for eggs and to take me out there and work together with me. And as I grew older, she was the one that said to me that I could take violin lessons. I had been taking some piano lessons in the 3rd and 4th grade, but I wanted to play violin because somebody had come to the school and talked about playing violin. And my dad was kind of against it, but my mom was against it in a sense, because she said, well, as long as you take piano and violin, even though they couldn't afford it. But she said, but it didn't take me long, and I cut the piano out and just kept with the violin. But she was very, very, very supportive of that. And that just kind of went on through the years. If something happened, I could always trust Mom. And she lived kind of a hard life in a lot of ways. Now, my dad, I have fewer memories of Dad when I was very, very small. I don't remember much about Dad. But I do remember him being kind of in charge of the household. They were taught at that point that the man was the head of the house, and he took the head of the house. And I remember times when he did things like, Mom needed a sewing machine, but he wouldn't let her pick it out. He took me to a store, and the two of us picked out a used sewing machine, which I still have, and he gave that to her. Also, when it came to buying cars, he never asked my mom whether he should buy a car or not. He just would go out and buy a car. And also the same thing happened with houses. Mom had very little to say where we were going to be living, because Dad kind of took over. So I kind of remember that part of my dad and my mom both, that he was the head of the house, and if he said, let's move, we moved. And he usually helped find the house, and we moved.
Was he a kind man?
Very kind. I remember one time when it was rainy and kind of muddy where we lived. We lived out in the country, and I had to walk to school every day, and I wanted another pair of boots, or galoshes we called them. And he said, no, you don't need galoshes anymore. You've got a pair. And I said, but Dad, they're old, they're broken. I need another pair. So I started crying and fussing at him. He didn't give in for a while. Finally, one day he came home with a new pair of galoshes for me. And I thought, he really did understand me finally. But he did buy me the galoshes, but it took me a few tears and arguing before I finally got them. But yeah, he was a very kind man. He loved candy. We always had some candy around him quite frequently. He'd bring home some candy from the store when he would go uptown. But we didn't have the really, really close relationship like I'd like to have had, but we did understand each other quite well. So.
Do you remember your dad's, the onset of Parkinson's?
No, because that happened when he was in his, 40s or 50s when he got it up in Canada. When the World War came, they moved from Kansas to Canada for a while, and that's where it started showing up. He had quite a lot of illness. Of course, I wasn't even born yet at that point, so he was very young when he got it. My most remembrance of Dad with his Parkinson's was that my mom did an awful lot of the work with him. She fed him. When it got so bad, she fed him. She shaved him, all of that. And one time he was choking, and she actually put her hand practically down his throat to take the beat out of his throat. So that's kind of the way I remember my dad in the wheelchair, even though I did know him sooner than that, but somehow it didn't affect me as like it did after till he got very bad with the disease, that I really saw him suffer with it, and my mom tried to help him through it. They were very good together.
Was he in a wheelchair most of your adult life, as long as you knew him?
No, he wasn't. That happened more when I was in high school, that age, that he got into the wheelchair. And I know you boys some of you saw him in the wheelchair when you were very young, because he was in the wheelchair when we were in Hillsborough there. So, and I don't remember much about any other place when Dad was sick like that. It was basically in Hillsborough.
Dad, how would you describe your mom and dad?
I was closer to my mother than I was my father. I was her baby. Sonny, she called me. That was my name in the family. My dad was a man of few words, relatively quiet. He was a preacher, and at the pulpit he would sound preachery. I've often said I've heard all 5 of my dad's sermons a bunch of times. What I mean is that my dad did not have a background in theology, but he studied the Bible and allowed the Holy Spirit and whatever else to give him inspiration for the Sunday sermons. I was somewhat removed from my dad because he stood very straight and he rarely bent in any way. I mean, he was straight as an arrow and lived up to his word. I never saw him cry. I never saw him, well, yeah, I did hear him swear a couple of times. Had a gut would be the equivalent of saying, "Oh God," as he milked the cow and the cow stepped in the bucket or something like that. There are 2 instances, though, of my dad that are very emotional, very special. As an 11-year-old kid, my family had just been away for my brother Ike's wedding. And coming back, we didn't all come back at the same time. So there was one night when Dad and I were alone together. I had my own bed, but I couldn't sleep. Restless, afraid a little bit, whatever. And I tiptoed to my dad's bed and said, "Papa, can I sleep with you?" And he said, "Sure, son." I crawled into bed and I was out like a light. The sad part of that instance is that we never talked about it. We never talked about how special it was for a father and a son to share a bed. And that's a beautiful memory. The second memory was just about 3 days before my dad died. Dad was in decreasing health. This was December 1969 or 68, and I was leaving the country in 1969, January of 1969. So I spent a night in the hospital room alone with Dad. Again, he and I together. And we talked a little bit, but not much. I asked Dad, "What would you like me to read for you?" And without blinking an eye, he said Psalm 1. "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. He's like a tree planted by the river of water." That's my last memory of my dad. Now, memories of Mom are extensive. But again, we hardly ever use the word love. But as a freshman in high school, I remember the first time, and fortunately it was not the last, in which I told Mom, "I love you." It was a Monday morning. I was heading out to school. I know it was a Monday because Mom was doing wash. Laundry always took place on Monday morning. And she was downstairs in the basement, and I was waiting for my ride, and I became homesick. Going away to high school, I had always been 3/4 of a mile from school. Now it was 9 miles away. I was waiting for the ride, and I ran down to the basement. I said, "Mom, I love you." She said, "Son, I love you too." And again, very, very good memories of my parents. I hardly ever got a spanking, but if Dad gave me a spanking, it was more in words rather than physical. By knowing that I had displeased him in some way. That hurt worse than a bang on the butt. There was very little corporal punishment in my family. I got a spanking or two for crazy stuff, I don't know, but both Mom and Dad they've ingrained themselves in my life in two separate ways. Mom has given me more of an emotional approach to life, and Dad has given me a structural view, money, keeping your word. Absolute rule in the family was if you say you will do something, you will do it. You don't change your mind. And so when we agree to do something and we change our mind, that's going backwards from a family tradition. But pleasant views, overall very pleasant views.
You know, I'd like to add something about my mom that I remembered now that I had forgotten before. That is that when I was in about the 3rd or 4th grade, my mother started working at the Blue Lake Cannery, and she was helping to do all kinds of things, like if corn was coming down the line, they'd take out the bad kernels or corn stuff, whatever it was. But she was such a hard worker at that, and she did that until almost, I don't know exactly how many years, but that's what she did for a living. She helped put the money on the food on the table, I should say, because...
Your mom did a lot of singing, too, didn't she?
Right, and
while she worked.
Yes, she sang, and in the home when she was cleaning up the house or doing anything in the house, she sang a lot. But a lot of the songs that towards the end of her life, or towards the end of, that I can remember living at home yet, were songs that she was like waiting to go to heaven. It was always, life was better. I wish I could remember the names of some of those songs, but it was always like a better life someday when I die than what she was living now, because she had a hard life. My dad, I can't say that he was a preacher or did one kind of a job. He'd go from place to place, farming, maybe, and then he started working at the cannery too, but he could only take a year or so, and he got out of that. We bought a farm. He bought a farm, and of course we lived there, and that was with cows. So he sold milk with that, and had a place on the hillside where there were strawberries planted. So he would do totally different kinds of jobs, but my mom stuck with the cannery because that was making the money. So I really appreciated the fact that she stuck with it and seemed to enjoy life, but yet I know she was having a hard time because of the way the songs she chose to sing. She was having a sad time towards the end.
So in those years with your brothers and your sisters, and it was the tail end of the Depression, going into World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, times were not easy financially for you guys. What's one of your memories of struggling a bit financially?
Well, my dad tells the story very clearly, or told the story very clearly, about having a grocery list to go into town to buy food for probably the month ahead, and he had no money. Mom gave him the grocery list, but he had no money. He drove into town, parked the car, walked away, and I don't know where, and prayed. When he came back, there was a $5 bill on the seat. He didn't know where it came from. He bought a month's supply of groceries with that $5 bill. We never had money to what we called splurge. We never took a family vacation. We wouldn't even have thought of coming to the Grand Palladium. That was simply beyond. Times were tough. In the recovery years, however, and very, very fortunately, Mom and Dad had invested enough in property, and in this time of early Social Security, were able to live comfortably. In other words, they struggled and struggled, but at the end of their life, they had some rewards. Now, when the estate was settled, after paying the hospital bills and all of that, your mom and I got about $2,000. That was our inheritance, plus a Buick, plus a car. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. we have the beautiful memories of all of the kinds of things that we did. And I think the fact that we were raised without very much made me a dreamer. I would think about what I would like to do, and I did a lot of reading about places. I probably even read something about the Caribbean in those days, but that was way outside of where I ever dreamt I might be. But I dreamed. I did a lot of dreaming. I was a daydreamer.
Well, and also with my family, I was the youngest one out of 6. So there was a 10-year difference between myself and my brother, the youngest brother, and then my sister was 12 years older. So I have very few memories of being together with them. My sister was a senior in high school when I was probably a first grader. And all I remember about my sister really was that one day in the senior high school, they said you could bring one of your family friends with you if you want to, your sister, your brothers, for a day at the high school. So I remember going to school with her. But she had a job already away from home on weekends and some weekdays. They had no money, and so even as a teenager, she had to be working, cleaning houses and helping other people. So I didn't really see much of my sister.
Your sister Helena?
Yeah, that's the only sister I have. Yeah, and my brother Ed was 10 years older than I am, and he was a man, a guy. I was a girl. I think my biggest thing with him was that I was probably a nuisance because I had a lot of energy, and I'd go do somersaults or get on tree limbs and hang over, and he said, and little kids at that time girls did not wear any long pants. So he was very embarrassed if I did any of that because my dress would come up, I think I was just kind of a pain in the neck for that guy. But the thing with money, we really just did not have much money at all. When we first moved there, when I was just 3, we spent the summer then after we got there picking hops. And they would put me into a big old hop basket where you generally put the hops, but they'd lay one down and then I'd take my naps there and stuff like that because the whole family that was still there. Now, like I said, my brother, Ben, was older and he was already away from home, so we didn't all 6 of us move there. But it was a very, very, very tough time, that move. But they didn't have anything going in Nebraska either, and they felt there was hope in Oregon. So that's why we did the hops and all kinds of other kinds of things that were picked in the summertime. It was because they didn't have the money.
Indoor plumbing, when did that arrive?
When did what?
Indoor plumbing.
Oh,
You have a story of your dad, I think.
Yeah.
Or your dad that still could not have a restroom in the house.
Your dad.
Okay.
That was your dad.
My dad built the house in which I grew up, and there was one sink, and the only plumbing came by way of a 50-gallon storage tank in the attic into which our windmill would pump the water, and then we could get cold water out of one tap. Okay. Indoor plumbing in the sense of a sewage system and a bathroom as such came it came when I was about 12 years old. And my dad had been so conditioned with outside toilets that the indoor plumbing just did not fit in his sense of what you ought to be doing inside a house. So he built, after we got the indoor plumbing, my mom made him tear down the old toilet. And this is a toilet that Dad had positioned when he built the house right in the front yard. If someone would drive into our yard, that's the first thing they'd see is toilet. Well, anyhow, when my dad recovered and decided he wanted to go back to the old times, he built another toilet for just himself, but way in the back, and that was okay. Pleased my mother a lot. It's a situation where someone whose life is very well structured has difficult bending. And I mentioned my dad stood very straight, very seldom bent. And that also had to do with his feelings about things, toilets and all of that. Let me add one word about the World War II Depression era. I grew up in a German-speaking family, and we spoke German routinely, and that's the first language I learned. But when I hit grade school, it was not only uncool to know German, because now we were classified as Nazis, the Germans, in the community. So I deliberately suppressed what German I knew until I got to college, and I took my first formal German class and realized how beautiful a language it is. And I picked up enough German. I can understand quite a bit, and I can sing in German. I have a couple of German songs that routinely become a part of my morning routine. Getting...
Yeah, sing it. He sings it at home all the time.
Go ahead, sing.
Go sing, okay. Gott ist die Liebe, Herr ist auf mich. Gott ist die Liebe, Herr liebt auch mich. Darum sag ich noch einmal, Gott ist die Liebe. Gott ist die Liebe, liebt auch mich. Translated, God is love. And I'll tell you one more time, that is, darum sag ich noch einmal, I'll tell you one more time, God is love. So that's a song I sang probably more than any other song. Then when I went to college, in the musical group, we sang some of the old classics. A song about Gottes Volk darf nie ermüden, God's people do not tire. It's a very good song. Yeah.
I don't remember singing anything in German because there were two kinds of German. He grew up in a family where there was what they called the High German or the real German. My family was what they called the Lower German. The Bible that was read every day, practically every day, was in High German. But before I could go to school, I had to learn how to speak English. So it was kind of the same type of a thing. We grew up in families where it was basically German, his High German, my Low German, and that's just the way it was. We had to learn.
But her family, especially her brothers and her uncles, spoke a Low German dialect.
Right, that's what I
that
said.
is a total, well, not total, it is a completely different kind of language. It's very earthy.
Almost like the Amish.
Yeah. And that I didn't know Low German until I came into the family and learned some of the expressions of Low German.
So you mentioned I think you were saying the Bible readings and all the rest. How would you describe your religious upbringing?
Well, we never missed church on Sunday ever, I don't think. It seemed like it was. My very first remembrance of church in Dallas, Oregon, when we moved there from Henderson, Nebraska. We lived in a town called Dallas Mennonite Brethren Church. Once a month, they had kind of a talent show, not a show, but program in the evening, Sunday evening. And I can remember very, very clearly when I was 3 or 4 years old, 4 at the lowest, they had me singing Jesus Wants Me for a Sunbeam. And I stood in front of that whole big audience and sang Jesus Loves Me as a Sunbeam. So I remember that, very young. And then, of course, we never missed church. It was always, church was very important. And my mom and dad were trying to live the life of the church and so forth, and we tried our best. But there were times when things didn't always go the way we thought they should. For example, when I was about 5th or 6th grade, we had moved to West Salem, and we were at another Mennonite Brethren church. But during Bible school that summer, we had a person that stood there in the front of the sanctuary at the end of at the end of Bible school day, and say, now, are you a Christian? Have you done A, B, C? Ask, believe, and confess so that you become a Christian. That's how you become a Christian. And I sat there with my classmates in the sanctuary, and I thought, I feel like I'm a Christian, but am I or am I not? Did I do ask, believe, and confess? Or did I confess, believe, and ask, So I thought, well, I better stay afterwards, because they said, if you don't do it right, you're not going to be a Christian. So I stayed afterwards, and another girl did too. And the teacher said, okay, let's talk a little bit. She said, okay, let's pray now, and you pray that God will come into your life, and be, you know, so forth. So we both prayed, and then the teacher said, do you feel any better now that you've prayed and asked God to be in your life? And I said, yes, but I really didn't at all. I thought I'd become a Christian a long time before. And part of the problem with that, too, was that before I left for Bible school that morning, my mom said, Mary Ann, you come right home after Bible school because we have a lot of things we have to do today. So don't stay after Bible school. You come right on home. Well, here I was now. I was saying, am I a Christian or am I not a Christian? And my mom said, get home right after. So do I believe my mom and go home, or do I not go home and go and see if I'm a Christian or not? So I chose to stay there because being a Christian would be the best thing I had to do. But the first thing I did as a Christian was lie. If I became a Christian at that point, you know, do you feel any better now that you've confessed your sins and you ask, believe, and confess? And I thought, I don't really, but my friend, my other girl that was there had said, yes, she did. And the teacher said, oh, okay, really good. And then when I thought, if she didn't say yes, what was the teacher going to say? She was going to say, well, we have to pray again. So I thought, I don't have time to pray again, so I'll just say yes. I changed. You know, first lie I ever took right after I became a Christian, supposedly.
Dad?
I think it's in the area of personal faith where I have the greatest respect for my parents and simultaneously the greatest disagreement with my parents. It's a paradox. I pulled a faith, or I pulled a necessity of having a faith from Mom and Dad, and started out exactly as they were. In other words, I was a mirror image of the embodiment of what they saw as faith. But I began to see that there were some blind spots within their faith. Blind spots in terms of other ways in which God speaks. My parents were bigoted. They were anti-black. It was okay to send money to Africa to convert the black people, but to have them move next door was not a good idea. And I saw that disparity between the theory of faith and what it really meant to have faith. In terms of the Bible, I memorized 500 Bible verses so I could go to a camp one summer. And that was an important part of my growth. I can still recite many verses from the Bible that have meaning, but they've taken on a new meaning for me because they're mine now. They're no longer my parents' or somebody else's understanding of God. They're personal. So I take from my parents the good things, and some of them I simply pass over because they're not me. My parents both believed the earth was 10,000 years old. That's not me. My view, God's involved. God's creator. We live in a very complicated universe. And it's so complicated that we can't even begin to understand it. We can wiggle our way around a little bit, and we can get the smartest people. We can get all the Einsteins. We don't understand the universe we're living in. And yet, the mystery of life, the mystery of the universe, is not something that I was taught to expect. I was taught that this is the universe, accept it. That's the way it is. And my world has opened. It's grown. I think it's better, but that's a value and judgment of mine.
So you mentioned last night that when you guys met, opposites attracted. So how are you different and how are you the same?
We have different ideas. For example, he loves the water. He loves to scuba dive. He loves all of that. I have never enjoyed water, ever. Don't really know how to swim well, but he likes it, so okay, go ahead and do your thing. You like it, I don't particularly like it. I enjoy I don't particularly like to be in the water. I don't like to, any of that kind of stuff with water. And high heat like this, I don't like to be out in the sunshine, partly because I got sunburned so often when I was little that I didn't particularly like the sun. I enjoy, well, he doesn't, see, I don't particularly, some of the difference is that I don't always accept and enjoy the fact that he goes and does scuba diving. When he goes away for a home once and they scuba dive many, many times with the classes like that, I don't want to know when he scuba dives, so I don't listen to, and he gives me a program for every day what they're going to do. I always watch the day after after he talks about, how do I say this? I don't look to see what he's going to do the day that they're going to do it, because I don't want to know when he scuba dives. I'm scared of scuba diving, and I'm going to lose him somewhere down the line in the ocean somewhere. So I always wait until the next day. Then I say, oh yeah, he scuba dived yesterday, but not today, so that was fine. Whereas we both like music. He was in a lot of stuff in college and high school. So octets, quartets, choirs, same as I was. So we do both enjoy music. But he's never taken an instrument. I've taken piano lessons and violin lessons. Did very well with violin for years and years and years, and enjoyed all the orchestra. He enjoys going to hear the orchestras I'm in. So we don't do the same thing, but yet we appreciate each other's talents for what they are, even though they're different than our own. But we get along because I don't say, oh, you can't go scuba diving. I can't stand it. You can't do it. No, he goes. I don't. Go ahead. But just don't take me with you. Whereas with music things, we go together onto those. Isn't that right? So there are some like that we just, I'm more, as a whole, speak out, and he doesn't usually speak out, but when he does, he really has a lot to say. I enjoyed college tremendously because I would go all over the place with anybody that I wanted to be with, always with the kind of in crowd in some ways. He was always kind of in the background in a lot of ways. So. But he, we got together, so interesting how we got together.
When we met and married at a very young age, and
20.
we didn't marry because we had to. It was our choice, okay? We were naive. I was naive.
We were naive.
But the naivete paid off in that it allowed me to dream about things that I wanted in a family that I never got before that. So as a naive 20-year-old, I began to dream about what life would hold, family, all of that. Of course, some of that's changed, absolutely. We've had situations to deal with in a family that I never imagined would happen. But that's life. And I've become much more tolerant of diversity, much more tolerant of other people, and much more tolerant of family, of what they're going to do, what they're going to be, and still maintain, respect and love and all of that. So I've changed some, sure, absolutely.
Well, we both have in that instant.
Had to. As I said the other night, looking for a perfect family is completely out of the question. It's a naive thing. It's a 20-year-old pipe dream. But a solid family, that's within reach. That's for us. And I hope that continues. The solidarity, we're in it together, good things happen, it happens to all of us. Bad things happen, it happens to all of us. We're in it together.
There also, Clarence, what we both were in college for, he was going to be a teacher, and I became a teacher too. So we had that in common, knowing what we wanted to do in life, in a sense. Of course, he kept it up, I did not. I stopped after 2 years and then couldn't teach anymore. But that was, in college days, we both wanted to be teachers, so that always helped to bring us together also.
You have 5 children. I want you to walk through all 5 children and your favorite memory of each of those children. So your favorite memory of Doug, then Duane, then me, then Danette and Debbie. Your favorite memory of Doug.
I won't say exactly the favorite memory, but what I remember is that how no matter what we did or gave Doug, he had to tear it all apart. In Minnesota, we'd give him a radio for Christmas or something like that. First thing he'd do is have to figure out how in the world it worked. He wanted to take everything apart, so we always had to be concerned. In fact, he'd plug in a plug-in when he was quite young, and it might shock him, but that's okay. He had to plug it in again because he just had to figure out how it worked. So that's one of my favorite memories to think of when I think of Doug. That's the way he was when he was young. He's probably still that way.
Dad, your favorite memory of Doug?
With Doug, on the same kind of theme, when we built the house on Wilson Street, the basement was unfinished. And Doug and his friend Larry Franz, strung wires from one end to the other and rigged up sort of a intercom between one end of the basement and the other. A part of his interest in technology and...
Okay, so Duane's memory.
I remember that when he was very, very little, but he did start quite young, before school started even, of getting the neighborhood kids together. And they put on a play for us. All the other, invite the neighborhood kids at the gateway, you know, and they'd have a play for us. Also, he would do things like in his, third grade class, I think it was, he had a, what do you call that? When he had the puppet type thing, and then he'd make the word.
Ventriloquism.
Yes, he was a ventriloquist, and the teacher said he did that for all kinds of things. He would use that way, but he would always get people together to make a play or do something like that. What's he doing now? Same thing with us.
I'm not sure if this is favorite, but it's sure typical. Duane was best man at Lenny Robinson's wedding. And after the wedding, Duane came to me and said, "Dad, I'm supposed to pay the preacher." And I said, "Well, yeah, as best man, you're supposed to transfer an envelope from the groom to the preacher." He said, "No, Lenny says I have to pay the preacher, and I don't have any money." So guess who paid the preacher for Lenny Robinson's wedding? I happen to have a $20 or something like that bill in my pocket and gave it to Duane. He paid the preacher for Lenny Robinson's wedding.
All right, for me.
Okay. I kind of sensed what the other 2 boys were going to be doing someday in life, but for you, David, I thought for sure you'd do something with trucks or cars, because you had all of the little cars in briefcases, every little, I can't remember the name of the Tinker Toys. No, it wasn't Tinker Toys.
Hot Wheels.
Yes. You had all of those. You played cars and trucks all the time. So those were kind of the remembrances I have of you as a kid. That's what I thought someday you would be, as a truck driver or car something or other, because you liked all those things. You're very good at it. So here you are, totally different than we thought. But I loved it. We always knew what to get you for Christmas, you know, trucks or these little cars or something like that, because you like that stuff.
Yeah.
Cute story, not necessarily favorite, but a cute story. When we lived in that house temporarily on Madison Street in Hillsborough while our house was being built on Wilson Street, there was a kitchen, and we kept our medicine in the very top shelf of the cabinet. You found a way of pulling out the drawers and climbing progressively up to stand on there, and presumably you had seen us get the aspirin or whatever, Tylenol, and you took a whole bunch of meds. And we took you to the hospital for them to aspirate your stomach to get rid of those whatevers that you had ingested. I don't know that you ever passed out. I doubt that you did. But you had within you a lot of unnecessary stuff. And it was typical maybe of David's curiosity, maybe his stupidity, maybe his willingness to live on the edge of things.
But not with trucks.
All of the above.
All right, Danette, what's your favorite memory of Danette?
Well, I remember a lot of Danette particularly when she was young. Well, even now, she had a bedroom by herself, and she would move that furniture all over the place. She was constantly putting things from one of the big dressers had a fish tank on it. She would move that whole fish tank and the dresser to another side of the room. She was always messing around with doing things differently than what they were, furniture-wise and so forth, especially in her room. And if she'd go to a store to look for clothing or something, she always found the most expensive dress on a rack without even looking at the little tag on it that said the price. She always could sense the best of everything like that. And she just seemed to be the kind which an interior designer, a decorator, by moving things around and all that kind of stuff. And I remember about Danette, she did a lot of that when she was young. Just a lot of that.
When we were living in Oklahoma, Lake Texoma, before we moved to Pennsylvania, after we had gone to back to Kansas to pick up Debbie from the adoption agency, we bought candy bars for Danette to hand out to her friends at the biology station, Lake Texoma. We didn't know what was happening at the time, but apparently Danette would hand out a candy bar or a chocolate bar, then she'd eat one. She'd hand out another one, then she'd eat one. And about 2 o'clock the next morning, all of a sudden we realized what she had done. She was sick, and we saw chocolate all over the place in that very, very hot apartment there at the biology station on Lake Texoma. One for you, one for me. One for you, one for me.
All right, Debbie.
Debbie was our little girl at home that had to have all the little animals. If an animal would die, if a cat would die, if a bird would die, she had birds. She had various little animals. She loved pets. She loved animals like that and took very good care of them. And also, the teachers would tell us that when a new person would come into the classroom, they would put that new person next to Debbie because Debbie liked to be with people and get the people used to being in the classroom. She was very, very friendly with people. So her love of people and animals showed up all the time, all her life, with John particularly, so forth. So that was Debbie, a person who cared and loved animals and people.
Still does.
And still does. That's what her job is today.
For Debbie, it's very clearly a favorite. When we were building or remodeling the house, the first house we bought in New Wilmington on Neshannock, we'd done the remodeling work. The house was all disheveled during the time, and after it was finished, we lit the fireplace downstairs, and Debbie laid down, and I conked out with her. And we have a photo of this taken without either. We were snoozing together. Debbie, little girl, little over a year old, sleeping on my shoulder there by the fireplace in the front room on Neshannock Avenue. That's clearly a favorite.
So I want to word this next question carefully so you answer it the way that I intend it. How has parenting changed you? Not how have you changed in your parenting, but how has parenting changed you?
I've become much more tolerant
That's just
of
what I was going to say.
what I see happening in the world by being a parent myself. There may have been a day when I would have said, my kids will never do that. Yeah, okay. So I've become more tolerant, maybe, I hope, more understanding, and certainly more aware of what it takes to be a human being in a complicated age like we have now. Our children and our grandchildren are living in a very different world in which than the one we grew up in. And becoming a parent has made me appreciate that to the extent to which that's going to happen in our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, whatever.
Well, I agree with that 100%. I just don't know how to say it like you do. I can remember the days when you kids were little, and you'd get your shoes dirty when you were like 2 and 3 years old. You were walking around and the shoes were dirty. I said, my children will never go to church with dirty shoes. Well, that didn't happen. Realistically, that was stupid, but I thought it was exactly right. That's kind of the way a lot of stuff we learned were taught when we were young. That we should, when you hear a teacher telling that 2 plus 2 is 4, you take it as that's the truth. But sometimes when your other friends and your other people talk to you, you can't believe everything they say, and that's kind of what's happened to me when we realized the world has changed. And some of the things, we're going to get dirty shoes on. We're not going to be, like he said, a perfect family. But we're going to love each other, and we're going to keep loving each other and trying to help each other through times. If there is a bad time together, that all the family will kind of join together and understand each other.
When it comes to raising your family, I won't say regrets, but is there anything you would do differently?
Well, in the world we were living in, I think we basically were different than a lot of other folks in some ways, in that we really wanted our children to all attend church and Sunday school together, learn what God is doing in their lives, help, trust more in the love of God and the way He could speak to us, either through the Bible or through other people. We always wanted that for our children, and yet we still sometimes, our children don't always all go to Sunday school or church, our grandkids and so forth. It's just a little different world out there now, so we have to be very understanding. But I'm not quite sure how we, like I said before, 2 plus 2 is 4, but does it always mean 4,
I probably wouldn't spank you two as much as I did if I
You
had
never
it to do
spanked
over
them.
again. Because I don't know that it did any particular good. It may not have done much harm, but
When did you do that? I don't remember you spanking any of the kids.
yeah.
I remember.
You remember?
I can tell you a story.
Oh,
When we had Duane participate in a child dedication service in Minneapolis, it was a formal dedication of children in the Minneapolis church. And Duane was crawling all over things up there. He would not stand still. He would not behave as we thought he should behave.
we tried to hold him, and he just
And
jumped
instead
back
of walking back to our pew and sitting down, we both just walked straight out to the back of the church sanctuary. I grabbed Duane, shook him by the shoulder, and I said, "God sure got you at your worst."
That's a true story, too.
Did you spank him?
No, I don't think I spanked. I probably shook him, like that.
He wanted to climb up and be with the choir members. He wanted to run all around the front of the church. We couldn't keep him by us or with us.
Oh, that's funny. We're here to celebrate your 60th wedding anniversary. That's a rare feat today. What kind of advice do you give, or would you give to any couple about making a marriage last 60 years and even longer, we hope?
Well, I'll give you much the same answer. Well, I'll elaborate a bit. The woman at the dive shop that we went to a couple of days ago, Lucea, I told her that this was our 60th anniversary we were celebrating. She says, "What's your secret?" That was her question of me, and I responded in part. It's a lot of give and take. People who can do things only one way are not going to be happy in marriage. Someone told us at one time that marriage is not a 50-50 situation, it's a 100-100 situation. Each person has to give 100% to the other person. And the advice that I would give, I guess, to somebody contemplating marriage today is do it. I believe people ought to be married before they're living together, before they're doing the child raising and so forth. But if you're going to do it with eyes wide open. because the world is changing and you need to be able to respond to a changing world. And you ought to have something that undergirds your life. For us, it's been our common faith. Us, it's been the belief that life is more than what we're seeing here now. Life goes beyond ourselves and will continue into the future, whether or not we're here. So, thinking to people who are naive, keep the naive view, because it's a good place to start. You've got to dream as you think about marriage, but also be prepared for the unexpected. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, but when. Something that you thought would never happen in your married life, your family life, is going to happen. Death, whatever.
Amen.
So I only have two more questions, and they're kind of related. You will be gone, but I want you to speak to your great-great-great-great-grandchildren.
Okay.
What would you want to tell them?
I think probably I would want to say to them, we love you no matter what. If things go wrong, we'll still be, in the family, within a family, if something goes wrong, we still are with our children, whether we like what they're doing or not. We will always love you. So that's one thing I would even like my grand and great-great-great-grandkids to know, that as love is shown to each other, you understand each other, you try to help each other with their problems and that sort of thing. We back you up with love.
I would tell the next generation and generations to follow is that a rule of a sense of history now, is important. You need to know where you've come from in order to figure out where you're going. And also, in life, in families, you pay forward. You can't pay back to your ancestors, but you're paying for the next generation and the generation that follows you. So you're paying your bill forward, both in terms of what you leave, what you plan, what you hope to accomplish, paying forward.
So related to that, paying it forward, there might be a reunion 100 years from now where they're going, oh yes, and then Clarence and Mary Ann were there. And you've done a great job of outlining, all your parents, your grandparents, what you remember, and the history. What do you want them to know about you?
I hope they could see in things I've done and said and so forth that love is somehow, you have to have love. If you don't love somebody and understanding of people, you're going to have problems. You have to be able to accept people, love people with what they're doing, whether you like it or not, whether it's family or not. You still need to love those kids or the grandkids, whatever. So I would hope to be remembered as somebody who did show love no matter what happened.
I would give two sets of answers to that question. I'd give a serious one and a not so serious. Serious one would be that I would like to be remembered as someone who cared very deeply for people, God, the earth that we live in. I think I would be proud to be known as an environmentalist.
He's the scientist of the family, I'm not.
Who sees the environmental ethic not just as something to keep the world going, but in order to give glory to God. My casual, not so serious answer would be similar to what happened in the classroom. I think I'd like to be remembered and would like to transmit the idea that I was a teacher of people. Not of things, but of people. And One of my students, in responding to a questionnaire on a course that he or she took from me, I don't know who said it, was, I learned more in this course than I wanted to know. And I think that's good, because if I have opened some eyes of students or helped them to see a little bit of the world in which we live and the context of things, that will be a reward. I hope I have taught them more than they wanted to know. Yeah.
Okay, this is a Debbie question. The Neshannock house, haunted or not haunted?
I say haunted. He
I'd
doesn't
say
believe in
it's in
stuff.
the eye of the beholder, and I'm not a beholder.
And I am. So is
And she
Debbie.
is.
All the kids were except for him. The kids were, and I was. He wasn't. We all saw the ghost. Did you remember seeing the ghost? You too?
I don't remember seeing a ghost. I remember hearing the piano
The
play with
piano.
nobody home.
That's exactly
So.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
As you get older, what's your greatest fear? Your greatest fear.
I've got it. Okay. I'm not afraid of dying. That's not a biggie for me. It's going to happen. My greatest fear is I'm going to leave a big mess behind.
He won't get the basement cleaned out or the attic. But I wouldn't know how to do it myself. So you kids would have the job and have the fun of figuring out what the sandhill we kept this for.
Is that really your greatest fear?
Mine? Absolutely.
Oh my. Mom?
Well, I think my greatest fear, and it's starting to come already now, is that I can't do the things I did at age 35, 40, and 50, and that bothers me. I have a fear that someday I'll be in a wheelchair or something like that, and I don't want to do that. But there's sometimes you can't help your own health. I mean, you can do all you can, but the fear for me is really that's my biggest fear. Even though my mom and my dad got along well with that all, he would take excellent care of me. I still don't want the idea of doing what I want to do. You can't do everything at 80 as you did at 25 and 40.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time accepting that.
Yep.
That's a hard time accepting that.
Another one of my fears might be spending the last days, years of my life sitting in a chair watching daytime television.
Days of our lives. He has to have a book in his hand and reading.
So your legacy. What do you want your legacy to be to your children, to your grandchildren? In family-wise, not the world, but for the family. What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't know. What do you want yours to be?
Well, I've already left a part of my legacy behind in my DNA, and your children, so forth. That's a given. I would also like to have a legacy of non-DNA inheritance transmitted. By that I mean the attitudes, beliefs, values that can't be contained in one's DNA, but are available to be transmitted like any other form of inheritance. I don't expect, well, we'll have some money for you kids. Yeah, we'll have some money, all things being equal. But that's not going to be the most important legacy that I would want to leave. I would want to leave attitudes, values.
Times together like this,
Yeah.
To enjoy them, think about it. Yeah, we had a great time. And why? Because we were all together. We learned to know each other better. We learned to know cousins, didn't know cousins before, now they do. So that's the type of thing I'd like to see happening also, kind of what you're talking about.
So you would like the family times to continue?
Yes, very definitely. My mom and my mother particularly had a family that there were 10 of them, 5 women, 5 men. They had reunions constantly every year, but every 5 or whatever 10 years they all got together. Not like this, you know, it wasn't one person paying for it, but they take turns, and they divide just because they wanted to stay together, even though they'd been living a ways apart. And I think that's very important.
We both would like to see cohesiveness in the continuing family, not just your family, but the total family of our 5 kids and connections and all of that. Yeah.
Anything else to add, Mom or Dad?
Well,
On
I think-
anything?
Well, just some, you know, we put a lot of our beliefs in God and how God helps us. So I don't want to leave God out of the picture, because a lot of the attitudes we have, we ask God to help us get through some of these problems, areas we might have, or so forth. So I even though we don't always read the Bible every day, we don't pray for